Yeah, bro. And another thing, bro. I don't understand this thing, right? Where us as South Africans, right? I keep referring to us as black people, but let me not say black people. Let me say South Africans, right? Me, as I was growing up, and I mean till this day, bro. I know that we've come a long way since, say, '94, post democracy, and having to catch up, after, the, being disadvantaged by, the previous regime, right? But in terms of business and how we were introduced to how business is made and conducted, bro. Like our parents, our grandfathers, and those people, they've been trading for a minute, bro. If you're talking about the buttering system, whatever the case is, and if you're talking about things that were taken from our forefathers, the land, whatever the case is, that means that these people really understood what it is to trade and whatever the case is. And if you take a look at how what a million or billion-dollar industry, the taxi industry is, that will show you that black people do really know what it takes, and they have the know-how to run a business and to move in different industries and trade, right? So but the culture that remain and that still remains is us as black people. If you don't have a lot, right, you make ends meet, whatever the case is. Typically the businesses that we start, as starter businesses, are the usual ones, the typical ones: car washes, tuck shops, spaza shops, maybe selling whatever little items from the home. The list goes on. But the real thing about business is knowing how to know how to run it, and knowing that you start small, and you go along with it until you reach a point where you're saying now you can eat off of the business itself, right? But it's like, I don't know where do we bridge the gap, between saying I'm starting a business that I need to see grow to a particular point, and like I'm only doing this, and as opposed to I'm only doing this because I need to put food on the table, whatever the case is. Those are two different things. You're starting something to survive, and you're starting something to sustain you, and for the long run, is two different things. Hence why education is important, right? And I know that even from '94 till now, bro, there's feats that we've reached, bro. People are really doing the most, and even on the international front, there's a lot of people, and it's no longer even a black and green and purple situation. It's a way of thinking type situation, where people who are looking towards better uh, um, prospects for themselves, and wanting a better life for themselves and their future and their children, their families, whatever the case is, they sort to getting the information that they need and utilizing it as such. But what I really wanted to speak to was, as black people, that cannot be the only businesses. Ukwenza amagwinya, ukwenza izikota, like spatlos, car washes, and by the way, having to run these businesses, there is no admin, run. I see a way of running it, meaning there's no paper trail even once the business doesn't work out, just for you, so that the next business that you start, or the next endeavor and entrepreneurship that you go on, you can look back and see where you went wrong, where the failures were, or where the shortcomings were, right? We don't do that, and we don't even seek to do that, because I mean, even with, like I said, our fathers, grandfathers, those people, they used to run businesses, whatever the case is, but we never look to those people for advice, whatever the case is. And even in instances where you can seek advice, whatever the case is, I don't think those advices are really taken serious by the young people. So it's like, I just seeing this right now, where there's a fund now, for spaza shops or tuck shops, in that sense, from the government, whatever the case is. But I mean, bro, like, there's like business, like a vast spectrum of business. But what I do think that approach is what the government was using is that, usually there's the NYDAs of the world and these other, you know, organizations that are meant to, boost the youth, the young people, and encouraging a spirit of entrepreneurship. But in a sense, it's like having to see what happens is when the government makes such opportunities available. People are taking advantage of such, right? Hence now they taking it, step by step and easy. But me, what I'm trying to say is, like, us as a people, aren't we supposed to be, say, looking for, solutions that work for us? Because I'm thinking some of these other things are demographic based, are location based, geographical location based, whatever the case is. And in order for you to cater for say a market, whatever the case is, that speaks to where you are, sometimes that's a different setting for a different location. You know what I'm trying to say? So I'm saying, how is it that if we are thinking along the same lines, whatever the case is, in terms of how we're trying to carry out businesses to people, how are we not coming together and trying to say, okay, look, we see this is how things are happening to us as aspiring entrepreneurs, as aspiring business people, and as people who live in a country where even assistance is available if you're trying to get in that space. How are we not coming together and trying to say, okay, look, this is how we're trying to move? If I'm in certain business, another person, you try to create a spider web, a train of sorts where, like, we're supporting each other in business, right? And even business information as well. And that's where the financial education also comes in, bro. Sometimes people have like money on them. You're working, but it's like you don't know what to do with your money, bro. There's a lot of things that you can put your money in, and let your money work for you. And it's like with the springing up of these seminars, business seminars, and business people that are there always trying to influence and encourage the spirit of entrepreneurship, getting in the business space, investing, whatever the case is. Never mind the pyramid schemes. That's not what I'm talking about. But I mean, if we are already there, that means that we possess the capabilities, to can be able to carry out these other things. So, like, genuinely, like, we should take the efforts, bro, to look for this information. And if you do have information as well, share with the people around you, bro. And I'm pretty sure that if we use our energies for things like that, bro, I think we'd be having different conversations right now, bro, as opposed to this thing that I keep seeing on our timelines, that we really are worried about things that don't really matter.